I've been drawing ever since I was a kid. I always would make up characters and little stories. One recurring character was named Monty. He was a frog. And by the end of the story, he would always get dismembered or killed. Monty always came back, you know. Naturally, I loved comics, and that aesthetic started to work its way into what I did with music. My merch, my music videos, my album art. Actually, my first bio was a comic that I made as well. I wanted to do this project because I have always loved music and loved comics and never saw the crossover as often as I would have liked, and especially not with girls. The comic and hobbyist world is an amazing, inclusive environment. If you ever go to a Comic-Con or Fan Expo, you'll see just people from all walks of life. It's so diverse, it's so accepting. Just like most fans of this medium, I wanted to be a creator too. I wanted to contribute to that amazing world of creativity. The core idea of the story is a young woman living on the poor side of the wall in the last city on earth. Her hope is hanging on by a thread, and in her misery, she meets a dark friend, and she's forced to turn within herself to overcome that. There's this subtle commentary on inner darkness. I've always had this battle in my life, light and dark, and I've always felt like a lot of people have experienced that too. It was cool to be able to write about that because that's the character I identify with more. A character that's real, a character that has flaws, somebody that makes mistakes, that isn't always smart, that doesn't always make the right decisions, but that doesn't mean you're not strong, and it doesn't mean you can't learn from all that stuff. And in fact, I think that you can only find strength through your weakness. I had a really rough idea of the story that I would bring into every songwriting session. It really helped direct sessions and direct where the song was gonna go. I didn't tell anyone on my management team or label yet because it was kind of this little dirty secret. I was afraid if I were to come forward with this concept record idea that people would think that that just meant I wanted to make some like indulgent, arty, niche project and didn't want to put the emphasis on the music, but I wanted to prove that these were going to be amazing songs and it was going to be this bigger idea. You set my head. During the writing process, I was also working on building the characters and starting to flesh out the basics of the story and the world. The art went through a few renditions before it even started looking like anything decent. It was crappy at first, but it's improved a lot. I started reading a lot of books too on art techniques and inking, and there was like just this plethora of information out there. I didn't know where to begin, but I read a lot. I even started sketching out maps and stats for the world in which the comic takes place. I read this book called Writing for Comics by Alan Moore, in which he says that your world building should happen before the plot line, and then everything falls into place after that. As the story and the music started to progress sort of at the same time, and the characters, it started to become clear that I could speak through this character, that I could say things that I never said before, that she was sort of like this conduit to see myself in the third person. I think in the past, Lights has always been this like maybe perceived or maybe self-perceived, but Lights has always been sweet and like positive, and I could never write angry songs. Well, this girl allowed me to write angry songs, and I was able to write Savage, for example. What do you do when a man don't love you? He takes the sun from the sky above you. So I was in traffic in LA, and I had this idea of a chorus and just sang it into my phone and recorded it as a voice note. Walked to the studio that day and said, this is the angry part of the story that I've been needing to write about. And Savage came out. How do you fix the damage? How do you break the habit? I never knew you could be so savage. Another song that formed early on Skin and Earth was Skydiving. You got me skydiving. You got me flying. The whole intro scene was the skydiving scene, and I thought, okay, I need a song called Skydiving. The idea of skydiving is a metaphor for falling into love. And so we wrote Skydiving, and it was this awesome song. And the apocalyptic sort of world came together, and skydiving wasn't really an option, so chucked that part of the story, but that was how that played into that song coming to fruition. It's taking my body now. Free fall with me. Get a little unruly. No guts, no glory. For We Were Here, I really wanted a badass anthem. It's a pivotal part of the story where the main character is discovering ownership of herself, learning how to be badass, basically. It's all about leaving your mark, however small or however big. And I've always closed my eyes, listened to this song, and pictured something burning.
Rooftop, dirty thoughts, all I got is 20 bucks, nights up, breeze.
We Were Here is like kind of my inner arsonist, anarchist anthem. Once we had a few good songs written, I felt like I was ready to bring up the idea to everybody, and I made a 10-page synopsis comic. At that point, the story was still in its early stages. The character names were still different, and even my art style was different. I was still inking on paper, but I pulled it all together and presented the idea, and everyone was stoked. It was kind of like this wave of, this is legit and this is happening now. My dream is like coming true, but also like, fuck, I don't know how to do this. I had the characters in the story fleshed out for the most part, but I didn't know how to actually finish the story and how to write it, or how to pace a page, or make panels flow or make you want to turn the page. I decided to reach for the stars and get in touch with Brian K. Vaughan. I'm a big Brian K. Vaughan fan. He writes a lot of the books that I love and read. He was the reason that I decided to write it myself. He encouraged me. He said, you know how to do this, you should do it. And he actually gave me a few really amazing notes on how he paces a page. Another creator I'm a big fan of is Jamie McKelvey. He was the one who encouraged me to go into digital art, do everything digitally. So I bought a tablet, I watched webinars, I got the software, and just started practicing. Watched tutorials online, endlessly Googling how to do things. And then went from there, man. I drew this comic chronologically, so I started with page 1 all the way through to 170. Went back on a few occasions to improve on previous art as my skills improved, but it was kind of this interesting process because I was always working forward and then going back to improve the things that I'd done. I think the best advice I heard during this whole time was, there's no such thing as good writing, just good rewriting. The more energy that I put into it, the more I realized how much it meant to me and how much heart I was putting into this project, and became more and more important. And I think probably the most important realization that I've made is that there's so much more to music than just what you hear. All the color palettes that I would always envision when I was hearing a song were starting to land on the page. So every chapter of the comic corresponds to a song on the record. And every color palette is unique to that song, so every chapter sort of has its own color palette. Kix was always pink and blue. It was always red. New Fears was always dark purple, burgundy.
I will back you up, I will show you love, I will give you all I got till I cannot hold on tight. I'm breathing for you.
Strangely, Until the Light was one of the hardest songs to write. It was the last one that was written for the record, and I ended up in a session with Corin Roddick from Purity Ring, who I'm a big fan of. I knew I needed a song between Skydiving and Savage. So that helped guide sonically where the song needed to go. And I knew it needed to be a song about kind of cruising against an apocalyptic background with this one flicker of hope that's, albeit temporary, very peaceful. So the colors were always the color of these toxic clouds that ended up being really pretty against this apocalyptic, industrial, broken down city.
Keep rolling till the sun will fight the good fight when tomorrow has come.
Giants was always purple and green, and that came to life in the video as well, in some of the surreal landscapes that made their way out of the comic. And that was actually an amazing video to see because it brought the comic world to life.
If we could be giants. If we could be giants.
How cool to be able to create a world and then to exist in it, like I've been existing in it this whole time, and now other people are. And that actually spawned the idea for the Instagram world. I used all the maps that I had built for this world that didn't necessarily end up in the comic, and basically boiled it down to one really cool map that you can interact with and explore deeper and deeper into the world. Go to Skin and Earth World on Instagram and you can be part of this world with me. This whole project has reminded me that there's so much more to music than what you hear, and there's so much more to art than what you see, and everyone's capable of so much more than they realize. Each of these songs has two meanings. Every character has two sides. No one's entirely good, no one's entirely evil. It's what you do with all those sides that matter. So I hope that you guys enjoy the project, experience it as a whole, experience it in different parts, do whatever you like, and maybe you'll even be inspired to do something of your own.